I really appreciate the candidness from Chair Gomez tonight in laying out what the majority position is on this issue. That's something that has been coming into focus in recent weeks, as we've heard statements from Governor Walz and others in the governing majority. And I think the exasperation, if it's fair to characterize it that way, that I heard in Chair Gomez's voice when she clarified that not all of you campaigned on a Social Security tax cut or Social Security tax repeal, full repeal. To the extent that that was something that was a misperception on our part, I assure you we're not the only ones. I assure you. I assure you there's Minnesotans everywhere throughout this state who had the same misconception that we apparently had, which is that as a party, you wanted to repeal the Social Security tax. And I also appreciate the candid nature of Chair Gomez's remarks because it really brings into focus for Minnesotans' minds the reality of what is meant when the majority talks about the rich. Because that little piece of rhetoric, the rich, has tremendous utility in directing attention to some imagined figure that isn't you. None of us think of ourselves as rich. Well, maybe Greg Davids does, I don't know. None of us thinks of ourselves as rich. But I think when we hear the term rich used in the political discourse, what comes to mind is something like rich Uncle Pennybags. I had to Google that. That's apparently the name of the Monopoly man, the guy on the board with the top hat and the smile who runs around. Or Daddy Warbucks from Annie, a guy with a huge mansion and a bunch of servants. I think that's what we think of. That's what comes to mind when we use the word rich. But Minnesotans, guess what? If you have a tax that you're paying on Social Security, you're regarded as rich, according to the majority. That's what's meant. If you're paying a tax on your Social Security, according to the comments made tonight by the tax chair, you don't need your money back. And I just think that the idea that we're going to sit here as arbiters of what people need to the degree that we're going to deny them what they're owed is awfully telling. It's remarkable. You know, there's an honest way to do this. I know there's all sorts of things you want to spend money on. Investments, you call it. Okay, fine. Then be honest about it. Repeal the Social Security tax and then raise taxes. Itemize it so that people know what's going on, so that people understand your intention. That you want their money because you think, you say, not just think, say they don't need it. But it's such an interesting concept, need, and we hear it every day. I'm about to make the same argument that I've already made twice before today in committee, because this is a persistent theme throughout the work that the majority is doing. Time and time again, every day, all day long, we hear testifiers telling us about their need. It's hard to raise children. It's tough to keep the balls in the air as a young family. Is that a new phenomenon? Did that just start in 2020, 2015, 2000, 1980? I'm pretty sure it's always been tough to be a young family. I'm pretty sure it's always been tough to keep things together, to provide for yourself, to provide for those you love. And these people, they did it. They completed their mission. And they didn't look to somebody else to provide it for them. It didn't even occur to them. It didn't even pop into their head that they should turn to somebody else and ask them to provide for their needs. No. They took a look at their situation. They inventoried their resources. They aspired to achieve. They put their nose to the grindstone, and they made it work. And they trusted in the promises that were made to them. Promises that assured them that that work would pay off, that if they saved, if they were responsible, if they were self-reliant, that it would pay off in the end. And instead, what we're telling them now is, you know what? We've got a new way of doing things. It's different than when you were growing up. Nowadays, we're saying, if you've done the right thing and therefore have more, we're going to come along and decide arbitrarily after all these years, after your entire life, we're just going to decide that you don't need what you've earned. You don't need it. And there's these other people who are just getting started. They do need it. So, yoink. It's not yours anymore. But look, even if that doesn't convince you, I don't have to convince you tonight. I'm not going to convince you tonight, all right? I know that. But you're going to be faced with this reality. We know it. It's in the numbers. You look at the state economic forecast, and what it shows is that what we can anticipate in terms of state revenue, what we can anticipate in terms of money coming in to these state coffers is going to remain relatively flat. And we're in a rush this session to spend the entirety of a 17.5, 19, 20 billion, who knows, number surplus. We keep changing how we calculate it. We're going to spend all of that, and we're going to raise your taxes, and we're not going to give you your Social Security tax repeal. And we're going to invest. We're going to take that money and we're going to invest it in all these new wonderful programs that are going to provide for everybody's need. The problem is, our grandparents and great-grandparents, the folks who didn't even occur to them to ask somebody else to help them, they have choices. That's how they got to where they're at, is by exercising those choices, by anticipating their needs, and by taking the action in order to provide for them. And what's going to end up happening is that the folks, because it's really easy to be generous with other people's money. It's really easy to say you're going to invest as if it's yours to invest. But when folks stop producing because they don't have any incentive to, because they know you're going to take it all away from them anyway eventually, they know that the better they do. Right now, under the way things were in previous generations, the incentive was, if I work harder, I'll get more. Now, the promise is, if I work harder and earn more, it's going to be taken from me, so I best not work. And we're seeing that. That's also revealed in the state economic forecast. A 6+% reduction in discretionary spending, an increase in money charged to credit cards, money taken out on credit. People, as it turns out, Minnesotans, and I owe this point to Representative Garofalo, Minnesotans are living much the same way that we're governing, as it turns out. So I guess we're going to see how it turns out. I guess we're going to see where it all leads. It's not going to be to a positive place. And so, again, tonight, this isn't. I never thought that Representative Niska would get called out of order before I would, but the point he was trying to make, notwithstanding, this really shouldn't be political, because it's not. This is about basic morality and responsibility. And I know you think you're being responsible by investing in the way that you think you are. But that's not what responsibility looks like. What responsibility looks like is these people who you say don't need the money that they spent a lifetime earning. That's what responsibility looks like. Taking care of yourself, taking care of yours. Preparing for the future, Looking ahead and planning what's down the road, adjusting the steering wheel, stopping for gas, making decisions that are smart, rational, forward-thinking. That's being responsible, not taking other people's money to redistribute it because you judge, as the deity you have appointed yourself to be, that these people don't need it and these people do. That is not responsibility.